This is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this talk I'd like to provide students with a walk through the first lesson in the Academy's Latin Grammar 1 course. If you go to the Latin Grammar 1 course page on the Academy Study Center and scroll down to Lesson 1, you'll see the lesson here, Study for Mastery. If you click on that, it'll open up this exposition of the lesson, and we're going to take a walk through this lesson together, and I'd like to read through it and comment a little bit just to make sure that everything is clear for you, and also to help with some pronunciation issues since you're going to see some Latin text, and I'd like to help you make sure that you know how to read it correctly. So let's just walk through this lesson together, and then after you've watched this prelection, you can go ahead and begin studying this lesson for yourself until you have it all mastered. So let's take a look at the lesson. I'm just going to read through and make some comments as we go. Welcome to Latin Grammar 1. The text we will be studying in this course is the Latin grammar of the 16th century Jesuit schoolmaster, Reverend Emmanuel Alvarez. So these lessons that we're studying in Latin Grammar 1 are actually old Latin lessons. And you may wonder, why are we studying an old Latin book? Aren't there any good modern Latin books? I could say that there are some good Latin books available today, but they don't teach Latin grammar the way that we need to learn it in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. We're studying Latin grammar as the beginning of our classical studies, and we're going to go on to study classical reasoning and classical rhetoric and get into philosophy and theology. And we've got to make sure that the grammar is taught in a way that will help us in those studies. So some modern books might be helpful to simply learn about Latin or learn the Latin language for the sake of reading or translation, but because we're studying grammar as the beginning of our study of the 7 liberal arts, we need to learn Latin grammar in a certain way. And back in the 16th century, these old Catholic schoolmasters shared our goal in education, and they wrote lessons for students like us. So that's why we're using an older text. Here in this lesson, you're going to see that I've retyped the text, so we're not going to see any old books or old pages in this lesson. But in the preview for Lesson 1, you'll see a copy of the text we're actually studying. And it says here that this text was studied by Catholics for several centuries. In this course, we will study the first 2 parts of Latin grammar, orthography and etymology. So there are 4 parts of grammar. The first 2 are orthography and etymology, and the second 2 are syntax and prosody. So in Latin Grammar 1, we're going to study the first 2 parts of grammar, orthography and etymology. Orthography, if this is a new word for you, orthography is the study of the letters and sounds of the language. Orthography is the study of the letters and sounds of the language. And if you look at the word orthography, it means writing or writing correctly. That's what orthography is. That's the first part of grammar. The second part of grammar is etymology. Etymology is the study of the words of a language with their forms and meanings. So etymology is a study of the actual words of the language with the forms and meanings that go along with them. So with this in mind, we'll go ahead and get started in studying Latin orthography in this first lesson. So let's get started. At the beginning of your lessons, you'll usually see a set of tasks to be completed. It says to complete the objectives for this lesson, complete the following tasks. So you can just walk through these tasks and make sure you get everything done as you work through this lesson. In these gray boxes with bold print, you'll see the text is taken directly from our Latin grammar lesson. So you don't need to look back to that old book. I've copied the Latin text here, and I'll read it for you in this prelection. And then down here you can see I've provided a translation for that Latin rule, and then sometimes I'll add some notes, not all the time, but sometimes. But there will always be a clear English translation for you. So even though I show you the Latin text, I provide an English translation and some comments. But I want you to see this Latin text because I want you to be familiar with this famous old Catholic Latin textbook. It's very important historically, and I'd like you to be familiar with it. So rule number 1 in lesson 1 here. I'm going to read the rule in Latin, and you can just listen and learn some of the pronunciation. You don't have to be perfect, and you may hear that there are different ways that Latin can be pronounced. There's classical or Roman Latin, and then there's ecclesiastical or Christian Latin. 2 different ways of pronouncing. I'm going to read this with Christian Latin because the author was a Christian author. So let's read rule number 1 in lesson 1 here. Litere quibus utuntur Latini sunt tres et viginti. Litere quibus utuntur Latini sunt tres et viginti. And you can see the translation down here. The letters which the Latins used are 3 and 20. That's another way of saying 23. There are 23 Latin letters. And then we have a list of the letters, but these are actually the names of the letters. That's why you see vowels added to the consonants. So let's just read through the names of the Latin letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, X, Y, Z. I'll read that one more time. I'll read it a little faster though. You can always back up this video and listen to it again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, X, Y, Z. That's the Latin alphabet. So again, the translation of the rule, the letters which the Latins used are 3 and 20, or there are 23 Latin letters, and then you've got the names of the letters. There's a note here, which I'll read. It says, here the names of the 23 Latin letters are listed. You will see that the vowels A, E, I, O, and U stand alone in the list. That means it's just the vowel itself with no other letter joined to it. You'll see the consonants are written with a vowel beside them because consonants cannot be spoken without a vowel. So every letter in this list whose name has more than one letter is most likely a consonant. The only one that's a little different would be upsilon, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So the consonants are written with a vowel beside them because consonants cannot be spoken without a vowel. It's worth noting that the letter kappa, is also called ka in some Latin grammar books. So that letter can be called kappa or ka. The letter upsilon is a bit different. It's also called I Graeca, which means the Greek eye. So these are the names of the 23 letters in Latin. On to Rule 2, we see that if we take these 23 letters, and we divide them, we can divide them into two groups of letters. We can divide them into vowels and consonants. So the rule here in number 2 reads, Litere dividuntur in vocales et consonantes. Litere dividuntur in vocales et consonantes. And that translates as, the letters are divided into vowels and consonants. Though there are 23 letters, all of these letters divide into only two classes, vowels and consonants. So you should be able to identify which letters are vowels and which letters are consonants. And we're going to learn that in the rules that follow. Rule number 3, vocales sunt sex. Vocales sunt sex. That means the vowels are 6 in number, or there are 6 vowels. So there are 6 vowels. A, E, I, O, U, and upsilon. The rule goes on to say, quarum ultima tantum in dictionibus Graecis locum habet. This translates as, there are 6 vowels, A, E, I, O, U, and upsilon, of which quarum, ultima, the last, so upsilon, tantum in dictionibus Graecis, only in Greek words, locum habet, has a place. So the vowel upsilon is only used in Greek words that are brought into Latin. So it's not really a Latin vowel. It's actually a Greek vowel. And we have 2 examples that are given to us here that show the vowel upsilon in a word brought into Latin from Greek. We have hieronymus, and Dionysius, So 2 examples of Greek words brought into Latin that have the vowel upsilon in them. So that's rule number 3. Rule number 4. Cetere appellantur consonantes. Cetere appellantur consonantes. The rest of the letters, that's what cetere means. Cetere means the rest. And of the letters, this phrase of the letters, we just understand that that's present behind the words, as it were. But all we see is cetere, which means the rest. The rest of the letters, appellantur, are called consonantes. They're called consonants, quod vocalibus iuncte simul sonent. Quod vocalibus iuncte simul sonent. Because to vowels joined only they make a sound. So you can see the word order of the Latin is not the same as the word order of the English. English, because it doesn't use many different forms, relies on word order to make sense. Whereas in Latin, because the words have endings and forms that reveal their meaning and use in the sentence, they can be moved around a little bit without changing the meaning of that sentence. So cetere appellantur consonantes, the rest are called consonants, quod vocalibus iuncte simul sonent, because to vowels joined only they can make a sound. So that's rule number 4. There's a note here that says that the word consonans or consonantes actually means sounding with, because consonants are letters that must be sounded with vowels. Consonants must be sounded with vowels. That's what the word consonant means. And that's why up here when we learn the alphabet, you can see that the consonants are always joined to vowels, because they cannot make a sound without having a vowel joined to them. So that was rule number 4. Rule number 5. So far we've been learning about letters. We learned that the letters divide into vowels and consonants. We learned there are 23 Latin letters, and they divide into vowels. There are 6 vowels. 5 of them are Latin vowels. 1 of them is a Greek vowel. The rest of the letters are called consonants. In rule number 5, we learn that syllaba fit ex literis una vel pluribus. Syllaba fit ex literis una vel pluribus. And this translates as a syllable fit is made ex literis, out of letters. A syllable is made out of letters. Una vel pluribus. Una vel pluribus. That means one letter or more. So a syllable is made out of letters, one or more. And then we've got examples here. The word ut means as. You'll always see this word ut before examples are given. It means as. So a syllable is made of letters, one or more, as these examples. The first example is the word aleas, and you can see it's divided into syllables here. You see the first syllable is just a single letter. That's why we have una for one letter. So the syllable a is followed by a syllable made of two letters, le, and then that's followed by another syllable of two letters, as, aleas. Then we see the word ars, which means art in Latin. Ars, you can see it's a syllable, one syllable made of three letters. Then we see force. Force is a syllable made of four letters. And trans is a syllable, a single syllable made of five different letters. So a syllable is made of letters, one letter, like a here in alias, or more than one, as all the other examples we looked at. So these are syllables. There's a note here, so let's take a look at this note. Every vowel in a word provides the basic sound of separate syllables. Thus, if there are 3 vowels in a word, they will normally be spoken in 3 separate syllables, with consonants going before and after the vowels. The examples provided simply show how syllables that are made of one or more letters. Their meanings are of no importance. In other words, don't worry what these words mean. They're simply used to show how syllables are made of one or more letters. All right, so that's rule number 5. Syllables are made out of letters. Rule number 6. Let me read the Latin. Syllaba quae fit ex duabus vocalibus vocator diphthongus. Syllaba quae fit ex duabus vocalibus vocator diphthongus. A syllable which or that fit is made ex duabus vocalibus out of 2 vowels, vocator is called diphthongus. Diphthongus means diphthong. And you see the translation here. A syllable that is made out of 2 vowels is called a diphthong. The word diphthong, which is a strange word that you need to get used to, the word diphthong comes from the Greek diphthongoi, which means 2 sounds. A diphthong is a special pair of vowels that are not divided into separate syllables. So up here in Rule 5, we learned that every vowel in a word provides the basic sound of separate syllables. Every vowel provides the basic sound of separate syllables, and you see this little note, except for diphthongs, see below. That's what we learned down here in rule number 6. A syllable is made out of 2 vowels called a diphthong. The word diphthong comes from Greek diphthongoi, which means 2 sounds. A diphthong is a special pair of vowels that are not divided into separate syllables, but they are spoken together in the same syllable or in one syllable. It is important to memorize these special pairs of syllables, or I should say pair of vowels. That's a typo there. It is important to memorize these special pairs of vowels because they must be identified when reading Latin. So every vowel will form a separate syllable unless the 2 vowels form a diphthong. Now the good news is there are only 6 diphthongs, and we've got to learn them because we've got to be able to identify them. And when we see these pairs of vowels in Latin reading, we read them together as one sound. That's what it means to be a diphthong. So we see in rule number 7, diphthongi sunt sex. Diphthongi sunt sex. The diphthongs are 6 in number, or there are 6 diphthongs. And you see we've got the diphthongs listed here. Now, to learn the names of these diphthongs, what I recommend is you just say the names of the letters, say the names of the vowels that make up each diphthong. So the first diphthong is a, and it's read with the sound I in classical Latin, or e in ecclesiastical Latin. You should learn this, however, as a. The second diphthong is au. The third diphthong is e. The fourth diphthong is eu. The fifth diphthong is o e. And the last diphthong is upsilon e. These are the 6 Latin diphthongs. And then here, at the end of this rule, you're simply given examples that have the diphthongs in it. So the first example has the diphthong a. The second example has the diphthong au. The third has e. The fourth has eu. The fifth has o e. And lastly, we see upsilon e. Okay, so these are just examples that show you the diphthongs being used. There are 6 diphthongs: a, au, e, eu, o, e, and upsilon iota, or upsilon e. That's rule number 7. Rule number 8. Dictio fit e syllabis ut alias. Dictio fit e syllabis. So we learned about letters, and then we learned about syllables. Now we're learning about dictio, or a word. Dictio fit e syllabis. A word is made out of syllables. A word is made out of syllables. Ut aleas. Aleas is a word. It's made of 3 syllables. Dictio fit e syllabis. A word is made out of syllables. Interdum fit ex una syllaba ut mors. Interdum means sometimes. Sometimes a word is made out of 1 syllable. And we have an example, mors. It's just 1 syllable, but that makes a word. So a word is made of syllables and sometimes is made of just 1 syllable. And lastly, rule number 9. So we've learned about letters, we've learned about syllables, we've learned about words, and now in rule number 9 we learned about speech. Dictio fit e syllabis. A word is made of syllables. Oratio fit e dictionibus. Oratio fit ex dictionibus. So oratio means a sentence or speech. A word is made out of syllables. Speech is made out of words. Oratio fit ex dictionibus. Speech or a sentence is made out of words. And they give you an example of several words together that form a sentence. But what matters here is simply the rule that oratio fit ex dictionibus. A sentence is made out of words. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the lesson, and then you see down here there's just some memory work to do. That's to help you to learn and memorize these rules so that you can use them and enjoy them in future studies. But you need to work through the lesson, and then after that complete the memory work, and you should be ready for your lesson assessment. So we've gone through this lesson, and again, the purpose of this walkthrough is simply to introduce you to the lesson. You're going to have to read this lesson carefully for yourself and study it for mastery. But I hope that you found this prelection helpful to get you ready to study this lesson and to do so successfully. If you have any questions, please post them on the course student forum on the course page on the Study Center, and I'll respond to you there. I hope you find this prelection helpful. If you have any questions, please get in touch. God bless your studies.